Welcome. I'm Todd Kipper with Montana App Score and the Institute on Ecosystems, and thank you for coming to the IOE Rough Cut Science Seminar Series. The Rough Cut series is designed to connect people across disciplines, departments, institutions, perspectives, and this semester we have a particularly diverse set of speakers, and so it's really great to get a topic today around data and work with a group who hasn't participated in these with the Montana State University Library, and they're a very innovative group. And I'm going to take a minute to introduce them, but before I do, really quick, next week will be Paul Stoy talking, and he'll talk about atmosphere or biosphere, sort of convective storm, so relationships, and then we will have an IOE social a week from this Friday at Bridger Brewing. And so everyone's invited, encouraged to come. So today we have Jason Clark. Jason's an associate professor and digital initiatives librarian. He's the head of the MSU Library Informatics and Computing Group. He joined MSU in 2005. He works in areas of semantic web development, metadata and data modeling, web services and APIs, search engine optimization, interface design, and all sorts of areas. Welcome, Jason. We have Sara Mannheimer today. Sara's an assistant professor and data management librarian. She joined MSU, I think, in 2014, in here just a short time. She works in research data services and open data, including data curation, data sharing, digital preservation. Welcome, Sara. And then we have Scott Young. He's an assistant professor and digital initiatives librarian. He joined MSU in 2012. He works in areas of web user experience, social media community building, and digital library development. So welcome, Scott, and thank you. And then I'll turn it over, and I think we're all looking forward to hear what you have to say.
Well, thank you, Todd. Thank you, Kathy, for inviting us. We're really excited to actually be presenting some of the research. And we came to this trying to kind of package two live research streams that are part of our research agenda at the library. And really the bind between them was binding them together with data. So you'll see us talk about two unique research streams over the course of this discussion today. I did want to open up with just one thing. That'll make sense in a second. Part of our research has been embracing some of the sort of stereotypes around librarians. Okay, so there's the joke. Thank you. I'll bring it up a little bit more further. The outline for today is going to be more about. So one of the streams is about thinking through the library as publisher. And that's a very rich statement these days, and I'll unpack that a little bit more. I have book in quotes because I wanted to talk about, in broader terms, about how scholarly communication and the mediums we use, whether it's white papers, journal articles, book data, in some cases it might be poetry or fiction, the various ways that we express the things we do as scholarship. That'll be one of the streams. Then we'll work through how it's related to open data discovery, reuse, and then Scott and Sara are going to focus on a very lively research stream around sentiment analysis of Twitter, so you can kind of see how we're working with data. And we'll close with some brief discussion of things that are happening at the library and the way that we work with data and how that helps, or we hope to help, the work that you do day in and day out. So, again, on this theme, this is a conversation that Scott has probably had, I have had, Sara has had. This idea of, okay, librarians, I think I know what you do, right? You really like books a lot, and you like to be around them and read them. And that's certainly true. I mean, I come from a humanities background initially, but our world has shifted. So there's new things that we do. Part of this research, this initial stream, was focusing on how do we do different things with book content. So this idea of building a different kind of book, whether it's, I'm going to take us through how we think of e-readers and that sort of scenario, those platforms. But it really afforded some new ways to think about how we make data, how we distribute data, and how we can rethink scholarly communications in the forms we use. So my section is data making, and the making we're doing is on an early set of prototypes that is grant supported around remaking the book container. Okay? I do want to unpack this. When we say things like library as publisher, we kind of have this idea of, you think of like traditional publishing would be pipeline generation, lead generation, marketing, that sort of thing, typesetting, formatting. Certainly those are roles that the library plays as publisher, but increasingly these roles that we play, and this kind of comes through in the department that we're part of, which is Library Informatics and Computing. We're about software development, discovery and analytics, data storage and archiving, and good metadata. And all of these components kind of come together in this project particularly. But it's more nuanced than that, right? You have this, so this is a, I don't know if you can kind of make that out. This is a New Yorker article, or cartoon, and it's a publisher or a publishing type saying to Dickens, Charles Dickens, you know, if you really if you had a better title for that, it might be findable or discoverable in more ways, right? So largely the work of library, of publishing, of building things for scholarly communication is complex, right? So this prototype and this particular project is, I'll go back, is about using HTML5, which is an emerging standard of HTML, to build and unlock book content. But it really has implications for how we might think of some of these other formats. Mark Greenwood is here. He's actually on the grant, or he's supplying support for the grant. We're going to mark up one of his textbooks. So he's a math and statistics professor here. Hi, Mark. So we're really trying to figure out how best to use this platform to create new types of products. We also have a student-run humanities journal, which is publishing fiction and poetry. So we're trying to diversify the platform itself and see how we can stretch where it goes. And really, again, this is kind of coming out of these conversations we see, right? So if you think about our book brand, right, and we can embrace that just like I can embrace my shush, right? We see stuff like this, right? Books are dead, books are dead. Does that mean libraries are dead? And what really started our conversation, and this was something that we started, Scott and I started probably about a year or two ago, was that there were opportunities here. Even if the book as we traditionally know it, or scholarly forms of communication as we traditionally know them, are dying, there's all kinds of new things we can do with them. New things like discovery, data reuse, like actually making sure that when you do mark up on the book that you can be, that it can be reused, repurposed as a different type of format. Questions of ownership, how do we publish and own the material that we have? Mark is another example of an author who self-published his book, so he owns that content, not somebody like Macmillan, right? And then it's also allowing for new measures of value, and I'll unpack these in a moment. This is a startup grant from the IMLS, which is one of our primary granting agencies. That came through in October, so we've been about 4 months on the grant, give or take. The research, I'll kind of move quickly through this. So it's more about emerging scholarly formats. The book itself and how we can refine and rebuild the interface, and then a more robust data model that allows for the different genres I already mentioned. And really, as we were coming to it, it was thinking through the book itself, the initial physical container, and what it is. So even just the Codex is what we call it, in humanities people call it the Codex. If you think about it, the Codex is this, the binded container. But if you think about that, just out of the box with that container you get data delivery, information access, and knowledge building. We started to think if that type of book is dying, what else can we do with it? So we can network it, we can make it shareable, and we can break it apart and autonomize it. So the initial project, when we were last fall, was for a for a history class. And you can kind of see our workflow as our tools evolve from MS Word into HTML into the expression of the book or of the scholarly medium that we have today. So yes, we saw all of this really as some form of information technology. And then but look at the similarities here, right? You've got, again, bound information encoded inside of an e-reader. There's similarities there. So the first thing that we started to do was break that apart and see if we could open up that platform. In HTML, this is, I mean, if you think through a little web history lesson, this is Tim Berners-Lee, he's at CERN, he's a researcher. This is the first HTML page. And initially, it's scoped to be a way to share research information. So we have things within HTML as a platform, that's how we display web pages. We have things within them that are very much tied to our conceptions of print formatting, stuff like title, head tags, paragraph tags inside. You don't see them here. But that metaphor, the way that the web was built is very conducive to publication. And so we noted that link and started to move our platform in that direction. This is a screenshot of the initial prototype. So you've got, and there are two pieces to this. There's a recipe and then an essay. You think of it, and then it's a bound book. So that allowed us to play with two formats initially, but obviously you can play with typesetting. It can be, it's columnar. It works, I won't show that one yet. It works on multiple screens. Again, so we're not bound to an ebook container format. The second prototype looks something like this, and this one is coming up. The first one we're doing is the OPSIS, the Fiction and Poetry Journal inside of it. But this is just some place marker. But you can see that the format itself, with both of them, works everywhere, which was really important to us as far as data reuse and what we could enable with this platform. So it also allows us to ask questions like this. What if? What if books were annotated at the page level? You think of the sort of container of the book. There are indexes, there are ways to get in and understand what's on a certain page, but not at the level that a digital product allows. So it also, additional articles like this, or additional concerns, issues around how would you annotate a journal article at the page level? Why would you want to? You think of how you might, we live in a world which is about a form of citation, social sharing, which is part of the research that Sara and Scott are going to bring forward in a moment. But so there are these reasons to think through how you would annotate and link even at a small, a very atomic level. So the book itself, because it is of the web, it works and it can be shared and bookmarked at just about every conceivable component. It also allows us to ask, what if books were analyzed at the page level? Like we can kind of get a sense of how well somebody's reading from a book based on time, progress, but those markers are different in digital environments. So we can do stuff like use of the web packages to understand, these are web analytics, web metrics packages, to understand what type of use, just on a day-to-day basis, the book itself is getting, how people are flowing through our site itself. So you can see where pages are sticky, how reading patterns happen. You can also see how things are being found, discovered. This is stuff that you can't really see inside of when you move into an EPUB or an ebook container. There's some of this data is there, but it's usually internal to the platform. So what was compelling, I think, when the funding agencies were looking at it was that there was an ability to open up and provide better data about how reading interfaces were working. And then you can even go into very detailed analysis of how does somebody actually push, touch, pull on the book itself. So you can see this is a heat map. You can see our pagination is working, and then table of contents, which is kind of our home. You can see how things work that way. So there's a different level of analytics enabled by this. You can also watch how people find you, right? You can see that German chili recipe, we are right in the sweet spot for that. So broader, and this is kind of the edge case of where the rest of the, and this is a good bridge into what Sara and Scott are going to talk about. What if books were machine indexed for semantic discovery? What if journal articles were semantically tagged at the paragraph level? So this gets at that sort of idea of marking up and annotating the book so that it can be found and cited at a very atomic level. And there are vocabularies that are starting to come forward that do things like this. This is schema.org is a controlled vocabulary, and it is the basis of our discovery vocabulary for the platform. And it is a vocabulary built by Google, Yahoo, Yandex, and Bing, which are the top search engines in the world that have created classes and ontologies for describing things like what a data set looks like. How is a data set attached to an article? And that is internal to, so like you actually put it inside of the HTML tags. You can kind of see. We were able to mark up in the first prototype, the recipe materials and the essays themselves with real rich information about cooking time, what the ingredients are, and what that allows you to do is at a machine level, you can go in and pick the valuable pieces of that page apart. Okay? So again, these prototypes work, especially these edge cases, because of good metadata, good structured data that works on the page. It also allows you to do things like this. You'll start to see yourself appear. So this is that page that we've been working through inside of a Google result. Because we've done the markup right, we have a picture. We have a brief annotation of what's there. The ingredients get surfaced right in the search result. And really, this is just there's an API behind that is a web service behind the platform that allows you to make calls and pull out certain machine-readable versions. On top of the HTML, which is very rich, you can do things like, give me item 1 from book number 2, and it'll pull out structured data for you. So really, the question is, why do this? Really, as I said, part of it was knowing and embracing who we are. We are people of the book. That's okay. Right? There's nothing. We have a stake in that, but we also have an opportunity. So we wanted to bring this conversation into the Academy. That was part of the grant narrative, part of the reason I'm speaking to all of you today. We thought there were opportunities for scholarly communication, other ways for us to look at this. We noticed initially that there was right out of the box, with this kind of platform, you could do incredible metrics that you couldn't touch with traditional book publication. And then we started to see that there might be ways to help surface and create discovery around scholarly articles and the more, what would we call it, the more component-based, smaller 14 to 15 page scholarly article. So the grant continues through next October. It's really a grant to refine and scale these prototypes into production, so we're trying to work with publishers. We're also interested in hearing from partners. I put out a call to, there's a professor in the art department who's actually making a photo book making, doing a photo book making course. And obviously that seems like a perfect fit for, we could do a book of images for that class project. But we're really interested also in moving more towards scholarly articles. So if people are interested in hearing more about this platform, how we might work, we're open. Please find us, and we have contact slides afterward. And then more to the point, the real book book brand works with it. But if you think of the act of reading, which has always been something that we've also supported, there's a real opportunity here with this research to understand how readability happens, how to improve how things work. There might even be opportunities for us to rethink the sort of organization of a scholarly article. Why we follow these conventions, and they're there for a reason: abstract, lit review, content, argument, conclusion. But some of this research may show that different kinds of structures allows for better learning. So our real focus has been on moving the grant to consider the act of reading. So it's a better book in the browser, findable, shareable, flexible, reusable. The prototypes are there, and then I should give a mention that this is a growing research team. So Kenning is here. Kenning is our dean, and he is really one who brought forward this strong identity of research around discovery. So I thank him for that, and it's really started to bloom and create all kinds of research threads, which Sara and Scott are going to pick up on a number 2. Thank you.
So a data librarianship blog that I read recently posted that science depends on good data, and the role of libraries is rapidly shifting towards a new goal, which is to be the producers of top quality web data. Librarians deal with all kinds of data, and from book data, as Jason just talked about, to a category of data that's especially relevant to you, research data. So Scott and I are looking at researchers on Twitter to see if we can get a broad sense of discipline-specific attitudes toward research data and toward open data in particular. So this talk will discuss open data, the movement in recent years, and then talk about how we've used sentiment analysis on a small data set to measure researcher attitudes toward open data as they're expressed on Twitter. We'll present our results, talk about how we might apply them to our own outreach efforts. And then this project raised some interesting ethical questions, so we'll briefly explore the ethical considerations surrounding using social media data for our own research. We'll discuss future research directions, and then I'll give an overview of our data services at MSU. So the open data movement has been gaining traction recently, and Barack Obama made open government a central idea in his presidency. He released a memo on the Freedom of Information Act on his first day in office, in which he quoted Louis Brandeis saying, "Sunlight is said to be the best of disinfectants." And Obama has continued to support open government by launching the data.gov portal, where anyone can access open government data. Municipal and state governments have followed suit, and as you can see, every state in the country now has at least a data policy or a data portal for open government data. So this data is being used by people in all kinds of ways. The blogger Ben Wellington of iQuant New York used New York City open data to discover that this fire hydrant, marked with a very small pink arrow, was generating the most parking tickets of any space in New York City. And so if this little space was a bike lane, it would be a legal parking space, but since it's not technically, this silver car in the middle is parked illegally. So after iQuant New York drew attention to this, that there were tens of thousands of dollars being paid in parking tickets unfairly, the Department of Transportation came in and marked the space clearly as a no parking zone. So Wellington says, this story is proof that anyone can use open data to improve our neighborhoods and our great city, one small discovery at a time. And as you know, the open data movement extends to scientific research as well. As scientific discovery becomes more driven by digital data, scientific communities are starting to make that research data open for sharing, reuse, and validation of results. So referring to open science, Michael Nielsen said in his book, Reinventing Discovery, over the next few years, we have an astonishing opportunity to change and improve the way science is done. In that mindset, the NSF and other funders are now requiring that data from grant-funded projects be published openly, and that is also extended to the private sector. The Gates Foundation recently implemented this policy saying that data underlying published research should be made accessible and open immediately. And some academic journals are also instituting open data policies. One of the earliest ones was the Joint Data Archiving Policy, which was from several prominent journals in ecology and evolution. And this was a really important step for data sharing. It was really unprecedented that so many journals would come together in support of open data. And a high-profile open data policy recently was the one from PLOS, which was less than a year ago. They implemented it, saying a minimal data set, so the data used to reach the conclusions drawn in the manuscript, had to be published. And the policy sparked a lively discussion, and one that was especially visible on Twitter. This Twitter user, DrugMonkey, coined the hashtag PLOSFail in order to voice his disapproval of the policy. So here's his tweet: "The open access data leach plan is just industrial espionage." And he also published a blog post that said, among other things, that curating data was too time-consuming, that other people could not understand his data, and that the policy was a fear tactic to try and exert control over scientists and lab practices. So those arguments were somewhat sensationalized, but there was a lot of agreement on Twitter. This Cold Spring Harbor laboratory says, by submitting the postdoc or grad student together with the raw data, the problem of data curation is easily solved. But those who were in favor of the policy also joined the discussion using the PLOSFail hashtag so that they would be in the conversation. But this other hashtag PLOSWin also began to surface. So PLOSFail is totally wrong, should be a PLOSWin, and the Scholarly Kitchen published a blog post that supported the policy. So Scott and I watched the PLOS discussion with some interest, and it made us wonder whether we could mine these tweets in order to measure researcher attitudes toward open data. We think we can, and we've used sentiment analysis, which is defined by Pang and Lee as the extraction of positive or negative opinions from unstructured text. Sentiment analysis has been used for political forecasting and also for e-commerce and brand research, but we wanted to use it to measure whether researchers view open data and data sharing positively or negatively. So we looked at the Twitter accounts of scientific societies from 6 different disciplines, and we chose followers from those societies who identified themselves as scientists in their Twitter bio. We pulled all their tweets down from the Twitter API for about 24 researchers from each discipline, and then we isolated data-related tweets just by searching for the word data, so a very simple search. So we're in the process of collaborating with computer science to develop a machine algorithm that will be specific to the data domain, but for this preliminary study, we coded the sentiment by hand. So I'll show you a few examples here. This one had an obvious sentiment, very positive. Here's a positive tweet saying, data available and added to the Paleo database, yay for open data. A negative, big data, a big flop. And a neutral, tech and social barriers to sharing data are being debated. What does sharing data mean to you? So this table gives an overview of the tweets we collected. We had researchers from genomics, sociology, economics, electrical engineering, paleontology, and chemistry. And we ended up with about 40,000 tweets from the researchers in each discipline. After we isolated the data-related tweets, we could see that there was a pretty big difference between disciplines. Chemists only tweeted 0.4% of the time about data, whereas genomicists' tweets mentioned data more than 2% of the time. And this graph shows the data-related tweets and their sentiment, with red being negative, gray neutral, green positive. So as we saw in the previous chart, genomicists did tweet the most about data, and the paleontologists were the most positive about data, with 47% positive tweets. Economists weren't far behind with 38%. Electrical engineers were the lowest positive sentiment with only 4%, but you can also see a lot of their tweets were neutral, and a lot of all of these tweets are neutral, and that's something Scott will discuss next when he talks about our study's limitations.
All right, so as we've moved forward with this research, we have encountered some interesting limitations and biases. So bias, of course, is mostly inescapable when conducting research, but with our particular research, we found some that were intriguing. So we'll talk about them a little bit. Social media is one of the central things that we're looking at, and we discovered that social media is not exactly perfect for this research. Its main limitation is sampling bias. So when we're looking at Twitter, the users of Twitter are overrepresented according to these categories. Twitter users are more often city dwellers, male, younger, African American, and by and large they're not scientists when compared to the general population. So when we use Twitter to extract opinions, we have to keep in mind that we're possibly overrepresenting for these categories. Pew has noted that the Twitter reaction to public events are often at odds with public opinion. So Pew discovered this when they compared some of the results that they got from their social media analysis with other instruments like surveys, and they didn't always match up. So the conversation that's happening on Twitter sometimes is different than conversation happening elsewhere. Our central method, sentiment analysis, as we've dived a little deeper into it, we've also discovered that sentiment analysis is not perfect. Zeynep Tufekci is a prominent sociologist, and she commented last year on a Newsweek study where they hired a company to do sentiment analysis on the Gamergate hashtag on Twitter. And this company found that 90% of the tweets around this hashtag were neutral. So she says here that the truth is really they couldn't tell. And the Gamergate hashtag, for those who are unaware, was a conversation around a sexism scandal in the gaming industry. It was a really polarizing debate, and the tweets were really not neutral. As Zeynep goes on to say, sentiment analysis on Twitter is really hard. There's only 140 characters. And so with the language communication so condensed, it can sometimes be hard to understand if someone is tweeting positively or negatively about something. So this is the results from the Newsweek study. Like our chart, the gray is neutral, red is negative, green is positive. What this shows is the limitation of the algorithm that this company used to detect the sentiment. Because a human could look through and see that 90% of the tweets about this conversation weren't negative. It's just that their algorithm couldn't detect the sentiment. So what we're trying to do is, when we move forward with this research, to tune our method so that we can extract meaningful positivity and negativity from the tweets, which will be a challenge. But that's part of what makes the research fun. As an example from our corpus, here's a paleontologist who says that she was so engrossed with interpreting her new data that she forgot that she needed to finish her review. And then she says, crap. So as we're going through this, we're hand coding this tweet. We're sort of scanning through. We note the exclamation point, so there's some excitement there. But then we see crap at the end, typically a negative word. So this could be thrown into the negative pile. But if we go back, engrossed is a positive word, so in some ways there's conflicting sentiment. You really have to read this and interpret it to understand that it's positive about data. But if this were to run through a machine algorithm, it might categorize it as neutral. So this is an interesting limitation of the sentiment analysis method. And there's a lot of published research just on the method itself for tuning sentiment analysis algorithms to meaningfully extract positive and negative sentiment. So that's where we're headed with our research as well, which takes us to big data. Okay, so you're probably not going to be surprised what comes next. Big data is not perfect. Okay, so big data under quotes. Who in here is working with what they would consider to be big data? Okay, so that's probably fine. So it means I can slam on it. No one's going to hate that. So big data, as we contextualize it for our research, data at machine speed and machine scale with analysis through computation. So right now, our research is sort of at the small data level. We've collected it mostly by hand. We've hand-coded it. Our analysis is just at human level. But we're interested in taking it and scaling our research up, collecting more tweets from more researchers, which will preclude us from going through tweet by tweet. So we'll have to design a machine to compute through our tweet data. Okay, so big data is, I guess we could call it a buzzword. Here is a major NIH-funded institute, the NIH Big Data to Knowledge. So this is a medical science institute, as this is a screenshot of their homepage. And as it says on their homepage, the ability to harvest the wealth of information contained in biomedical big data will advance our understanding of human health and disease. So in many circles, this is the predominant attitude towards big data, that it will advance understanding. But what we've discovered is that we need to bring a particularly critical awareness to big data. Because as another sociologist, Nathan Jurgensen, notes, numbers are seductive because they look like answers. When we have big numbers, we're sort of tempted to think that we can see big answers. But it's not so simple. In September 13, I was having a conversation on Twitter. This is my Twitter account. If any of you want to jump on Twitter, give me a follow right now. Please do so. So this other researcher says, perhaps people conclude that internet research of public tweets and such are fair game, even without the easy ability to anonymize. So this is like a standard practice in social science research, to protect the safety of the research participant, anonymize their data, keep their personalized information private. So I responded, okay, good questions. I've taken Twitter, Instagram, other social media data as public and therefore reusable. So some people think that this is the case. People are using social media in public forums, so anyone else can jump in, take that data, and use it for whatever research purposes or whatever else they want. Since September 13, my own perspective has advanced a little bit and become more nuanced. With the help of this major study, actually, that was released last summer that some of you may be familiar with. By shorthand, it's known as the Facebook Emotional Contagion Study. Facebook manipulated the news feeds of about 700,000 users to see if they could make people post either more happy emotions or sadder emotions. They found that they could move the emotional needle, which was an interesting study, but it raised interesting ethical questions as well. Should Facebook be allowed to do this? And a lot of academic researchers said that Facebook breached ethical guidelines because they didn't communicate the nature of the research with their participants. But the researchers Facebook researchers partnered with Cornell researchers, which is why academics were talking about this. The researchers said that their study was within the bounds of Facebook's data use policy, which all Facebook users sign up for, whether they know it or not, when they sign up for Facebook. So it raised some really interesting questions about consent, informed consent, communication of the research, what is even a research participant and a research subject. So James Grimmelman, a law professor at the University of Maryland, said that this study is a scandal because it brought Facebook's troubling practices into our realm, academia, where we still have standards of treating people with dignity and serving the common good. So as we start to move forward with social media data, particularly social media big data, we want to keep in mind what does it mean to treat our subjects with dignity and to serve the common good, not only our own particular research agenda, but what is the common good as academic researchers, especially at a land-grant public university. So the ethical concerns that we're exploring right now, communication with subjects and participants on social media. There's some really interesting discussion around just the nature of subjects and participants for social media data. Some have said that studying tweets is not actually studying human subjects, but studying web documents. So it doesn't even enter the realm of human subject research. So we don't have to go to an IRB board, or we don't have to worry about any of the ethical questions that are involved with working with human subjects, because really we're just looking at text. That's sort of a gray area. We also want to concern ourselves with the transparency of our research. Do our participants, should they be aware of what we're trying to do, our goals, our methods, how it will affect them? And then keeping self-awareness with our research, and keeping in mind questions about the value of our results and if it's worth the potential privacy violations to our research participants. And then there's some interesting copyright and data sharing questions. So in particular with Twitter, Twitter has said that a Twitter user retains the copyright to the tweets that they produce. So if we collect their tweets en masse, we want to share our research data, which is part of what our goals are to support open data. But the open data question is confused a little bit when it involves social media data because there are different copyright restrictions. So those are interesting and unanswered questions right now that we're grappling with. Thanks.
So from here, we will navigate that ethical gray area as best we can. But our ultimate goal is to create better partnerships and better communication between us, the library, and you, the researchers. We think that the findings that we showed earlier can provide clues about the attitudes toward open data in different disciplines that will help us tailor our services to researcher needs. This research shows who's discussing data the most, who is discussing it most positively, and we hope that will be a useful knowledge for us. Our results, of course, will require further interpretation to determine what it actually means that each discipline is discussing data more or less positively. And we think our collaboration with computer science will help our results be more meaningful, more accurate, and more thorough, just because we'll have bigger numbers and more nuanced sentiment coding. We're also planning to conduct a qualitative ethnography We'll talk directly to researchers about their opinions on open data, so that will serve as a counterpoint to what's very quantitative right now. And of course, this research has also piqued our interest about ethics, so we plan to join the conversation around that issue, adding our library perspective. So our research here are 6 studies that are informing data services and library services on a broader level. And since I got here last year, we started ramping up our data services. We provide data management planning consultation, data documentation and metadata help, data storage and publication in partnership with ITC, and we can publish data in our institutional repository, ScholarWorks. So publishing data, just a little pitch here, not only is it required by many funding agencies now, but it has been shown to increase citations for your publications. So it's something we really want to help you do, and it's something we think will increase the profile of MSU research. And ScholarWorks, too, is a place where all of MSU's research is gathered in one place and is available openly to anyone in the state. So it supports our land-grant mission. Anyone in the state of Montana will be able to read your research, and anyone in the world, really. And we've also optimized ScholarWorks for search engines, so people can Google your article in Google Scholar and come up with a free version of your paper. And the Faculty Senate just signed a statement of support for open access a couple weeks ago. So ScholarWorks is a great place to publish that open access version if you see fit. And we have at the library a scholarly communication librarian, Layla Sturman, who's happy. You can call her and she'll help you navigate the publisher agreements to make sure that it's okay for you to publish an open access version. And I think I speak for all of us at the library that we're really excited about these initiatives, and so should you see any of us around, please talk to us or come over to the library and we can help you out. Yeah. So here's our contact.